Okay, here's my breakdown for my latest piece, Hotel Continen. It's based on Francisco's really beautiful art. And I call it Hotel Continen just based on the fact that if I zoom in, I can see the words Hotel Continent on one of the cloth things. And you know what? That was good enough for me. The reason I decided to create this kind of stylized piece was because I had been seeing a lot of people online who've been doing these kind of recreating 3D out of a 2D image, and they're just like so spectacular, and I just wanted to try it out for myself. So I think what I adore about Francisco's art is almost the same thing that I loved about Urban Anna's art as well. It's just that it feels playful. He warps shapes and perspectives quite a lot, but there's something that just feels quite alive in his art. In addition, I really enjoyed creating Urban Anna's piece, and I was kind of longing to get back to creating this kind of very like emulating traditional art kind of environment. Something I quickly realized though is that people who create these kind of 3D environments where you recreate traditional art feelings are talented as fuck. I'm not even talking about that they're really skilled in one area. They're skilled in both fundamental traditional arts as well as being technical geniuses. They can tell you how they would achieve a certain effect or why a color behaves in a certain way based on how the hairs of the brush falls on paper. And then 2 minutes later, they can go on to tell you about how to create the fall-off curves in a shader editor to recreate this. As someone who's lacking both traditional fundamentals and is not well traversed in terms of logical thinking, I kind of realized this is going to be an uphill battle. But I do have one talent, and that's the utter lack of understanding when I should give up on a project because I'm utterly unqualified to see it through. But that's what's going to make this project possible. So the first thing that I'm trying to figure out is how do I do this? It's a very obvious question, but here's my thinking. Like, it's not that difficult to just create a building, auto UV map it, and then literally just paint over it. Or rather, it's tedious, but there's no real challenge to it other than time. But before I get into solving that kind of issue, I'm just going through what I'm going to do in terms of very default, regular modeling kind of things. So the first thing I want to do is that I'm obviously going to make it modular. I have a lot of buildings, and it would help if I can reuse pieces. Two is that I want to rely on tileable textures and trim sheets as much as I can, rather than unique textures. This isn't really a requirement, but it's just something in terms of pipeline I start preferring. I'll have some exceptions, but most of the time, this is the rule I want to follow. And then number three is just like vertex color variation, so I can create variation without it having to be in the textures. Apart from that, there's also one thing that I want to incorporate in my methodology, and that's a personal choice of mine, but I want to limit fake 3D. Like when recreating 2D pieces, it's not that uncommon to stage the pieces almost like a theater scene that only works from one perspective. Apart from grease pencil, I want my scene to be as if you could actually walk in this environment and pan around objects, etc. Okay, so with the modular structure, kind of like the default modeling kind of planned, I'm now getting into my research phase of answering the second question, like how do I achieve this art style in 3D? This part of the video will be a bit messy, mostly because it also reflects that I was kind of flailing in different directions to find something that worked. But yeah, so let's get on with it. In terms of getting a hand-painted feeling, I instinctively went back to one of my solutions in Urban Anna's work. That is, I created a base layer of paper that was overlaying the texture and the normals, and I just applied it to all my materials. But then I realized a big difference between this and Urban Anna's artwork, though, and that is that Urban Anna's artwork was mostly just focused on one building, and it had a one-point perspective. This means that the illusion of paper texture on my materials kind of works because most of it is just angled at the camera. Francisco's piece, however, employs a three-point perspective, and now I am immediately running into that it no longer really feels like it's drawn on paper, because now every surface that has the texture is now angled, scaled, and warped in accordance to perspective. This would work great if my goal was to make something that looked like someone had painted a city on paper, made cutouts, and then assembled it like a gingerbread house. But that's not really what I'm going for. So now I have to reconsider my options. I mean, I could also just add an effect to the camera or the compositor to get the paper textures. But in the end, I kind of feel like Francisco's art or kind of fills out his colors quite a lot. So I'm wondering how much do I actually need to focus on the paper texture feeling of it. I don't think it's like super necessarily prevalent in his work. So at this point, I'm feeling a bit lost because now I don't have the paper texture. I don't really have anything. I know how to accomplish the modeling task ahead, but I feel like if I'm unable to at least have some idea how to reach Francisco's art style, I won't really be comfortable enough to move forward. So now I'm scouring the web for any direction to go, and I really feel that the tricky part about when you're stuck in how to solve a stylized piece, it is so difficult to find solutions unless you're already following a person you're aspiring to be like. I feel like there are a lot of tutorials for realism and there are a lot of tutorials for maybe anime, but anything in between or some kind of unique style is really tricky to find a solution to. But eventually, I do remember seeing a video from Cody Ginger. He has done some things that have gone viral in terms of customized normals, and I feel like that was the closest thing that I wanted to achieve. So I'm going back in school mode here, and I go through all his tutorials, go a little deep dive into his train of thought when it comes to stylization and recreating hand-painted feelings. The first one he suggests is customized normals. This is a cool trick. I think most people in stylized 3D modeling have seen this by now, which is basically manipulating the normal map and create brushstrokes in between them, so that when the light hits, almost everything looks a bit, more painted on. I tried some of his customized brush normal techniques, but it just wasn't really working for the piece. I think it's because the technique works better on objects that are a bit more simplified and focus on one color. As soon as I'm applying customized normal to an object like a brick texture, I feel like it really wasn't reading off as hand painted, but just a bit messy. He also goes through some other techniques that I try, like offsetting the textures in the compositor, something that I again feels didn't really fit the piece because again, when you're working on very small details, I feel like the offsetting thing just kind of confuses the silhouette. In the end, I went really simple and just added the Kuwahara effect in real time in the real time compositor. That was definitely like an moment. I've been working so hard to find different kind of roots, and in the end, it was just like one node in the compositor. But it's also not really about what is the most complex solution. It's about if I'm closer to my goal. And, I've never worked with Blender Compositor until now, so it's not too bad. I'm still learning something. And at this point, I'm pretty happy. It's giving some kind of oil painting kind of effect. So at this point, I'm setting up all my other basic textures and trim sheets I'll be needing, just creating most of my assets. I'm also doing some unique models with unique textures that I couldn't really get into my trim sheets, and I'm using geometry nodes just to place them. You might be noticing that everything is very straight at this point, while in the reference photos there is more wonkiness. This is something a lot of people commented on during my process, but it was very intentional. My thought process is that I thought if I wonkify my modular pieces, the wonkiness only lives in that piece. And then, like if I start stacking them up or creating some kind of array, it becomes very obvious that it's the same wonky piece being repeated, which doesn't really feel organic. The other option I would have would be to do the same thing I did with Urban Anna's piece with some bricks along the road where you put an array modifier and then a displacement modifier after that. And then you get some kind of like wonkiness that works on many small objects. But the issue here is that I'm looking for a very specific silhouette. I'm looking for it to like flare out in the bottom or the top, or it will almost sometimes twists in a specific way. And I figured that the best way to achieve this would be to use a lattice. So my thought was just be that I would just model everything as if it would be an actual building, combine it, and then apply a lattice. I am aware that this is a destructive workflow, so it did happen a couple of times where I wanted to make adjustments after I've already like applied the lattice and everything. So I had to like go back and redo the process. And listen, like I hope one day we will be able to have modifiers on collections. That would be the modular dream. But until then, this was the best solution that I could think of. So let's get to the vertex painting. This part will be a bit different from other parts of the video. Instead of me trying to edit a summary of what I'm doing, I'm just going to do this live. So if you feel like this is going to be taking too long, you can skip this part. I'm looking at the reference image again, and I'm looking at the grunge. So like I said before, it is possible to do this 3D model and then simply just unwrap it and paint all these grunges individually by hand. Or you could have a kind of tiling texture like this, maybe with smaller details, and just put it on top of here. But then I don't get the minute control over the grunge, which I might want to have. In terms of like how it wraps around the windows here and stuff like that. So my first idea here is that if I'm just doing a cube to show, is that, well, I could do a vertex painting thing. So if I go in shading and I do this, I have this thing where I can't pull in the images here anymore, but you know what? I can work around that. That's fine. So if I just plug this in, and then my idea was that if I do a color attribute node, split. No, is it not split? This is the annoying thing about 3D programs, that everyone kind of calls things differently. It's separate color. Oh, it's right here. Okay. So let's just duplicate this one. And I mean, I think in my case, I was thinking that I would have two different textures, but just for sake of this, I'm gonna do this one a little darker. And we do a mix again, right? No, hold on. Do this and this. And let's say the red channel is the one. So let's go into Vertex Painting. Right, I need to actually create a vertex. I already have one. Okay. So now I'm putting white, but you know, white does have the red channel. I'm not separating anymore. So my plan was just to do this, but then as you can see, I feel like I'm not doing anything. Hold on. As you can see, if I don't have enough vertices here, it's not gonna really do much in terms of getting a good result. Trying to figure out, I mean, this is not really that important actually, but I just want to see if there's something that can kind of show this a bit more clearly. Well, okay, anyway, so, oh wait, sorry, this is because I plugged in the factory here for some reason. And it's not doing anything anyway. This is not a good example of what I'm trying to do. What if I actually just do the red channel then? Okay, that's weird. All right, so for sake of, let's pretend that this is a different texture. And you know, if I don't have enough vertices here to blend between these two, it's not really gonna do much. So my solution for this, which was not a good solution, was just to subdivide this. Do I have to do it? There you go. And I was doing quite a lot of cuts like this to really get like the minute detail of being able to wrap around windows and stuff. And this kind of worked because like if you zoomed out, it did give like this impression of something being broken up. But the vertices were like getting out of hand, and even though they were, I think I was telling myself that, you know what, it's just going to be a rendered piece, so it doesn't really matter that much. But it did matter that much. Like the scene started lagging quite a lot. And my friend again from Gothenburg who came to visit me, he saw what I had been doing and he's like, no, I mean, instead of relaxing and having a drink with me, he went into panic mode to help me solve it. And he showed me a better way of doing this. So that was my point here, is that I also want to just show you the method that he went through. It's based on this YouTube video here, except that the technique is very different. He kind of just extrapolated the thinking process of this and applied it to Blender and what I wanted in my piece. So the first thing that he did was, so let's just delete this. And let's say, if we look at the concept or the reference image again, we kind of just want a tiling texture that has this, some kind of like variation in the texture, which is this. Hello? Yeah. But then we want something to break up with these kind of like crunch spots. So what we'll do first, sorry, I got a bit of a cold. So instead of making the grunge separately, this what I did was that I figured that I can just, like I did here. What is going on with Windows lately? Like, I don't know what they did with Explorer window. Like, it's okay. I think my computer's just dying somehow. All right, I got some weird thing where I couldn't click folders, but I'm back. So but then I thought, instead of doing the color map, why not just make it black and white in Substance Designer, and then within, I still can't pull files in. And then inside of Blender, I will do the mix thing. So let's just get this one inside here. Just so we have it here. But before we do that, we're just gonna create the grunge. And the way that we want to create the grunge is based on a box mapping method, instead of trying to use the UVs of the actual cube. And the way that we do that, we do a texture coordinate. And then from here, we will generate the textures. Sorry, we're gonna generate the UV mapping here, or projection rather, I think. And we do a vector transform. So then we do from point. No, sorry, from we're gonna be using the points from object to world. So we're going to be using the world space instead. And then we do the mapping. So let's get our grunge. I don't have that here. Right. Okay, we have our grunge. Let's just look at the grunge very quickly. It is just a noise that has some kind of blobby things to do inside of it to kind of give the feeling of this. My friend told me to avoid complete black spots and complete white spots and just have something in between, but that I probably need to test this out a bit. All right, and then we get our grunge map and we plug this into vector. So let's just see how this looks like. So this is not looking great, but that's because we haven't told what kind of generation we're going to do. So instead of doing flat projection, we're doing a box projection. And now, as you can see, this is using world space instead of the objects. So this will be the basis of our grunge, and it is quite, or at least we want to have some kind of control over this. So let's do a value here. Do we need a multiply vector or a normal multiply? Vector math? I think we need a vector math. And we do a little multiplication here. So here, now we can have some kind of scale control of our grunge. And maybe we can just rename this, just so we have some kind of... All right. So the next thing that we would want to do is to look at these two textures that we want to blend. Just for this example, I think I'm gonna go quite intense, just so we can kind of see more. Wait, is this, oh, this one is super subdivided on. We might just want to add another cube, just so you can see that we don't need as much subdivision as this one. Okay, so let's just do something very extreme. Super red and super blue. So then you're gonna see how we mix these two together. Again, this is gonna be controlled by the color attribute. So we do color attribute, and then, I mean, it doesn't really matter which channel that you pick. I'm gonna pick red. I mean, you could probably do that one as well, but just to make it easy for myself. So we do, this is the part that I don't completely understand, but what you do is that you add the red color, or whatever color you pick, and then you wait. I keep putting in do a multiply. I mean, we can maybe do this in real time so we can kind of see what's happening. I'm just gonna do some subdivision so we can kind of see something. There you go. And then we add the red color back into the, and then we're gonna have something that is blending between the two grunge maps a bit better. We might want to color range this just to see it a little better. Color ramp, you can do like min-max as well. So let's just see if we pull these together a bit closer. So obviously, the more vertex points you have, the better it's going to be. But now we don't need that density of vertices to get the same kind of result. You still need some more density, because like now I still can't really control, like if there's a window here, I can't really control the way that it's behaving now, but it is giving the what I'm really after here, which is the small variations of the grunge textures. So for example, this will of course be R factor in mixing between these two. So if I do a mix color here, and I say this is A, this is B, and the factor will be whatever this is, this will be the result of blending the two textures. Maybe we can just, so we can see a little bit of that, because I feel like that's going to be more of a fair representation of how these are going to be blending. Right. So another thing that he did was when he looked at this one, because you can kind of have the light orange grunge that goes here, that's a bit more controllable, but then you have these splash or botches of little grunge spots going through the texture as well, that he wanted to represent by doing another mapping from here. So let's just see. We're going to be reusing this entire thing. And maybe we can rename this to grunge scale 2. Well, I don't need this one actually. I think I can just do this one directly in here. And this will do, in the end here, another mix color where the factor, this one instead. We might want to multiply that one. I can just give you some kind of variation as well. And yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty much it for how I did this shader. You can also do, because I was asking about that, that it feels like it's indented because of the grunge. So then you can actually use the same grunge as like a bump and plug it into normal, and then you will have some kind of indenture into the grunge as well. I also want to say that now, while I'm still on the subject of material, I had a lot of back and forth in thinking about how I would create these materials. So one thing I did was at one point to add line art to some of the materials that had bigger shapes, like some bricks along the roads and stuff like that. I think the line art just worked on these materials with bigger shapes, because as soon as I started putting that same kind of line art on small objects like the bricks on the house, it really didn't work. And I guess that's the dangerous part of when you want to have line art as part of your work, but you're also using grease pencil. You'll have line art that varies in thickness, which is realistic, but also won't really translate the idea that this is something that's like hand painted or drawn with the same kind of pen. Like you want some varying thickness because a traditional artist would, apply different kind of pressure, but also use different kind of pens. But at the same time, there is almost like this. I don't know. You can kind of tell when it just feels a bit off because the thickness is just varying too much within the same piece. Um, Another thing that I was struggling with in this piece was the tree. I mean, so if I look at the tree, it's a heavily stylized tree. It's almost a bit like the Adventure Time tree. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this in the best way possible. And my first thought is, what if I just create a bunch of metaballs? I get the main shape, then instead of just manually adding some planes to that shape, that would literally have taken 3 minutes. I wanted to experiment a bit with geometry nodes. So I wanted to use the vertices to randomly scatter planes that would be facing the same direction as the vertex that it's on. I thought, wow, what an incredible idea. What an absolute amazing thing to work if it will do what I'm imagining it will do. But then it didn't work. It just didn't work. Like even my friend who was helping me with the Vertex painting thing was trying to figure out why the data transfer and lighting was not working. But we didn't get anywhere. And again, like in a very climactic turn of events, I just made the shape in metaballs and just in grease pencil drew the lines that I wanted to create the toon feeling. And it was good enough. Like I also think I wasn't gonna be able to solve this in a better way. Like one day, I will figure out how to do this procedurally, But until then, I will just admit defeat. And this had to be my result. Then, a very big part of this was, of course, grease pencil. Because one thing that I had been thinking about was the painter effects that I had been looking online and trying to employ. They weren't really the main part that was giving Francisco's kind of art style. It was like the line art. But as luck would have it, in my case, grease pencil completely bugged out in my scene. I was spending hours and days searching high and low on the internet for a solution, asking Reddit, ChatGPT, a guru on top of a hill. It turned up nothing. I was questioning my sanity. I was opening new scenes where the grease pencil was active, and I tried to recreate the steps perfectly, but nothing worked. As in, like, grease pencil would work in the new scene, but then I was trying to retrace its steps of doing grease pencil in my working scene, and it did not work. Eventually, I came up with the most annoying solution to work around it, and it would be to open a fresh Blender scene, import whatever object I wanted to get grease pencil lines on from my main scene, then append the grease pencil object back into my scene, and then it would work. Great. I'm happy I was able to find a solution, but damn, it was one of those solutions I really didn't hope for. I did just make one artistic decision here, was to auto-generate grease pencil lines on most of my objects that were outside the focus of the camera, but then everything within the camera, which was mostly just the hotel and maybe some objects that were kind of close to the hotel, I drew by hand. Like my thought process was, you have to put it in a little grease to give that organic touch, like the artistic sense. But damn, that was such a long process to do by hand, and my hand was cramping, especially with grease pencil occasionally flying off in 3D space. It was just a really tiring process. I got there, but in hindsight, I do feel like I could have almost gotten away with just auto-generating the grease pencil lines and maybe hand painted, erased some of the lines instead of just doing everything from scratch. So then I have some final touches as well. It was mostly just working with the clouds. Again, I tried a couple of different methods. Some were only available in cycles, so I couldn't really use them for my piece since I'm using Eevee. Again, it was pretty much a simple solution that did it for me. It's Metaballs. I mean, Metaballs, it really is my bread and butter for most things here. And it just had a simple shader to it that was a color ramp, because otherwise I felt like everything else was interfering a bit too much. I also added some flying birds, which I used this tutorial for. And after that, I'm just about to wrap this breakdown with some final thoughts. I'm quite proud of this piece. I feel like I was able to challenge myself in following an art style that's very different to my own, as well as very different from what you usually see rendered in 3D. So it became a challenge just to reproduce this specific art style in 3D. I feel like I wasn't able to completely recreate the original piece, which was a bit disappointing, but at the same time, I do feel like that I was going very hard for everything to be full 3D and as procedural as possible. I think if I had just gone for a lot of fake 3D, I couldn't gotten maybe closer to the end result. But this also kind of made the piece a bit more my take instead of just completely a piece that is recreated as it is in 2D. There are just some things I personally feel don't work as well in 3D as they do in 2D. And working around that to still get an overall rendition is something I realize is important to me. But either way, that's it for my breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm aware that this breakdown kind of came down to me trying to solve things in some exciting way, but then just ended up falling flat. Tail between my legs and going back to basics. But maybe that's the schadenfreude of all the entertaining part of this. So yeah, thank you for watching this process video, and I'll just add some extra work in progress footage here as well.